I have a gift for you. I am going to gift you an insight into a lesson. I'm going to teach a lesson on transporting living systems. That topic covers osmosis, it covers diffusion, active transport. I am going to do that in living systems, so I will do an example in plants and I'll do an example in animals. But before we get started, let me invite a couple of people from my platforms to join in so that more people would benefit from the lesson. Hi! If you happen to be a parent who chances on the video, please share the video with your children. I am hoping that I'm on the right page, and yes, I am. Teresa, hi sis. This is a lesson intended for the students themselves. In fact, I'm actually teaching live. So if you have a GCSE candidate and A-level candidate, a Key Stage 3 students, can you invite them to come watch with their pens, papers, and notebooks? It's a lesson that I'm recording for people I do teach. In fact, one of the first people on that list is my daughter. She's actually in that class. But I've decided to open it up so that anybody who wants to participate and benefit can. This is my public service contribution to knowledge in our community today. And I hope that I have a few people who are able to tap into it, people who can benefit from it and do take advantage of it. I am hoping that I'd get a few people on before we start. So give me a minute, let me invite more people to join in, and then we go. If you're a parent of a child that I'm aware of, I'm about to send you an invitation to join the video. It's not necessarily for you. Hi sis. It is for your kid. If you can find a way of getting the child to access and to learn, that would be wonderful. All I'm trying to do is invite. Hi. Okay. It would be nice if I could do more, but it looks to me like it would be much better for me to go. So I am going to get straight into things and hope for the best. If you know any groups where you have parents and you have parents of children who might be exam candidates, can you especially invite those groups to join us and to have the kids ready with their books to go? Right, I am teaching a unit. I am teaching a biology unit today. That unit is called Transporting Living Systems, and it covers specific topics. It covers osmosis, diffusion, active transport, and I'm going to record a lesson for that. You are invited to watch. If it's not applicable to you and you know somebody who would benefit, then please do. This is a lesson for students. And from this point onwards, hi Nana, hi. I am going to invite you to watch what I do on the iPad. This is where the lesson is. I am trying to get the angles right, but if it's difficult to see what I'm doing, can you let me know, please? If it's difficult to see, please do let me know. I am hoping that you can read what I've got here and you can see what I'm about to write. Can you give me a little bit of feedback? Let me know if for whatever reason I'm not able to. Alright guys, can you check angles for me on I need signs and let me see if viewers can actually see what is on. Okay, it might be a good idea to do a buffer test on this one. Hello. Okay, looks to me that the screen is in shot. If it's not, please let me know. Is the screen in shot? Can you see? Because it's going to be very funny to read. Ras, hello, hi everybody. Right, it's a very funny angle to walk into, but I am actually going to teach. And so I'm hoping that I have my angles right and you can see what it is that I'm trying to teach today. I'm going to teach a topic in biology. If you are somebody who will benefit from a biology lesson, that's great. If not, and you know somebody who might benefit from a biology lesson, can you gift them this free lesson with their pens and papers in hand? If I was teaching your kid personally, you would pay me the very barest minimum, would be 25 to 30 pounds for this pleasure. Right. I think the angles are fine. I can't see any protests, so let's get in. Let me open this on another page where I can see what's happening on the phone, and then we'll be very ready to go. Okay, I think that I can see you, and I think you can also see everything on the screen now. Fabulous. Right, so I am teaching a unit. I am teaching this unit in the transport in living systems. We will look at transport in animals and in plants, but we're going to start with the methods of transport. We will look at two broad groups of methods. We will look at passive transport and active transport. If you are passive, it does not involve energy. Active transport involves energy. The reason why it does not require energy is that passive transport moves from an area of high concentration and it goes to an area of low concentration, which is a bit like going downhill on a ski slope. So high concentration to low concentration, so the actual expression is that you go down a concentration gradient. And in active transport, you actually go from an area where there is low and you climb up to where there is already high concentrations. So what you're going is against the concentration gradient. So these are the two main categories: passive transport and active transport. And we're going to say active transport, we only look at active transport, so life is easy. On the passive transport, we will look at two cases. We will look at the case of diffusion and we will look at the case of osmosis. Diffusion is for solutes and osmosis is for the universal solvent, which is water. I will try very hard to answer your questions live. So if you have live questions, please do. Daniel, I am sorry, you are completely lost. You've come to the wrong page. No, it's not. And we will not be discussing that whatsoever. You need to go look elsewhere for it. Some of you are just unbelievable. Unbelievable. All right. So we are at the moment focusing on passive transport. And as I said, we will look at osmosis and we will look at diffusion. One of the key questions you get is questions asking you to define osmosis. You define osmosis, it is the movement of water molecules from an area of high concentration to an area of lower concentration and the key word is this: across a partially permeable membrane. All right, let's make this a different color and show you the scoring points. Movement from high to low concentration will be 1 scoring point. It is the movement of water will be another scoring point, and across a partially permeable membrane is your third scoring point. So questions for diffusion of osmosis tends to be 3 points, and the 3 points are from here. It's especially for water, movement of water from a high concentration of water to a low concentration of water, or down the water concentration gradient. Different ways of saying the same thing. And the third and final one is the fact that it's across a partially permeable membrane. Yeah? Diffusion, on the other hand, is everything here except we look at it's the movement of solute particles, movement of substances down a concentration gradient. Down a concentration gradient can also represent from a high concentration to a low concentration. Different ways of putting the same point across. Definitions of diffusion, funnily enough, tends to be 1 marker because there's only 1 point to be made. Movement of substances down a concentration gradient. You don't need to mention what the substances are.
And Ms. Johnson said that you must include net movement.
It is the net movement, absolutely. Because things move in all directions all the time. But what we're looking at is net movement. Okay. That takes care of definitions for osmosis and diffusion. Active transport is the movement of substances against the concentration gradient. So it goes from an area of low concentration to an area where there is high concentration, and it involves the use of energy. Now, definitions are important, but that's not the more important thing to do. What we look at is applications of these things, and we're going to look at applications. I'm going to do applications in animals and in plants. And I think we'll start with plants because we will finish off with animals, which are more relevant. If we start with a plant has 3 main parts. It has the crown, where you find the leaves, and you have the stem, and you have the roots. And funnily enough, in the roots, at the tip of the root, you have the very specialized cell that is the root hair cell with a large surface area. Water will need to move into the root, and water is going to move by osmosis. Things called bulk nutrients. Things like potassium, nitrogen, and stuff like that, nitrates, will move into the root hair cell by diffusion. Because there's more in the soil than there is inside the root hair. Diffusion, down a concentration gradient. It is these trace elements, things like cobalt, stuff that you have very little in the soil anyway, and is more concentrated into the cell sac of the plant cells, and they go against the concentration gradient, so this will be moving by active transport. The movement of photosynthase from the leaf cells to all the other parts also involves active transport. But let's concentrate here. So bulk nutrients are moving by diffusion, water is moving by osmosis, and trace minerals will move by active transport. In the leaf, there is a process called transpiration, which is the equivalent of sweating in plants. And in this process, Kofi, I'm so sorry. This is a lesson, so it's got to be done in English. If you want me to explain in tree, I will happily have a look at it at some point. But I wonder what you would use this information in tree for. These are for people looking to write an exam, which will be held in English, so it's best to explain in English in the language they would answer in. If you want it in tree, get in touch with me privately, and I'll attempt to explain transport to you in tree. I don't know if I'm even capable of that, but let's see. So we have, if you've ever looked at the structure of a leaf, we have these special things at the bottom called the stomata. The stomata is where water leaves by a process called transpiration. And transpiration is a special case of osmosis. Movement of water is by osmosis. Okay. We will find applications again in living systems, in plants. We've already looked at, we can look at animals. And one of the places to look at in animals is in the very depth of the lungs. You have these little folded substances called alveoli. They are only one cell thick because it's an exchange surface. Around each alveolus, you have loads of blood capillaries in contact with the alveolar walls. Inside the alveolus, you will have more oxygen because you breathe in more oxygen. And inside the blood, you will have more carbon dioxide because deoxygenated blood contains more carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide, there is more in the blood. So when it moves from the blood and it goes into the lungs, it is classic diffusion because it's going from a high concentration to a low concentration. And oxygen will do the exact opposite also using osmosis. More oxygen in the lungs, less in the blood. Oxygen goes. Oh, no, I did not. Diffusion. If I did, it was just excitement. I'm glad you raised it. No, it's diffusion. So diffusion of carbon dioxide from the blood into the lungs and diffusion of oxygen from the lungs into the blood. And that's why when you look at most textbooks, it would say that there is an exchange of gases. So it's called gaseous exchange. Let me recap what we've said so far just to make sure that things are in place, because it helps to have recaps every now and again. We are looking at transport, and we are looking at transport using 3 processes at the moment. 2 of those processes are described as passive, and 1 of those processes is active. And whether you are passive or active is determined by whether we use energy or no energy is involved. And the reason why energy might or might not be involved depends on how the substance is moving. So in the passive processes, you start from an area where there is high concentration, which is like being high on a mountain, and you're going down to an area of low concentration. Going from high to low is easy, requires no energy. So you can describe that as going down a concentration gradient. In active transport, you're going from where there is less to where there is more. So you're going against the concentration gradient. So passive transport, we are going to look at diffusion as an example of passive transport, and osmosis also as an example of passive transport. Osmosis is just a special case of diffusion, basically, looking at the transport of water only. Active transport is just that. At key stage 4, you can write energy, preferably as you go older. ATP is much better. Right. Osmosis, the definition is a 3-point question usually. It's the movement of water, so mentioning water in itself is 1 mark. Down a concentration water gradient, or from a high concentration of water to a low concentration of water. That's your 2nd point. And the 3rd and final point is across a partially permeable membrane. In old-fashioned textbooks, it's described as a semi-permeable membrane. Same thing. Diffusion, and all this is looking at net movement. Some go forward, some go backwards, but we're looking at overall movement. Diffusion is the movement of substances down a concentration gradient. And because it's only making 1 point, it tends to be 1 mark only. And then we've just seen applications of these around a plant in uptake through the roots. So substances are taken up. We have 3 categories of substances. Bulk substances like nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. And we have trace minerals like cobalt, etc. The ones which are in bulk, you have more in the soil than you have in the plant, so it goes down the concentration gradient, classic case of diffusion. The ones where you have less in the soil, you tend to have concentrations of them more in the plant, so it goes against the concentration gradient, and so it is active transport. And obviously all these things are taken up, dissolved in water, and the movement of water is osmosis. An application in animals is in the lungs, in the specific place of the alveolus or alveoli, plural. There is diffusion across, and it's diffusion of carbon dioxide from the blood capillaries into the alveoli, and diffusion of oxygen from the alveoli into the blood capillaries, and this is described as gaseous exchange. Another application which you are required to know is exchange in the intestines, which is absorption. So you have the guts, and in the lining of the human intestines, you've got these finger-like projections called villi. You know I can't draw, so my drawings are bad, you get used to it. And food goes through in one direction. It's like having a comb-like, hair-like thing, and food just brushes against it as it moves. Again, you have loads of blood capillaries, and so substances, nutrients would diffuse from the gut into the bloodstream via the villi. Each villi looks like that. It has an epithelial coating, and you do get these little feather projections off the epithelial coatings called microvilli. And the job of microvilli and the villi themselves is to increase surface area for absorption to be efficient. The substances, the surfaces are thin, they are moist, and they have a good supply of blood vessels so that diffusion can happen quickly. Obviously, hours after you've eaten, when most of the things have been absorbed into your blood, you will be going against a concentration gradient. So hours after food has digested, you will be absorbing by active transport. Okay. 3 applications. I think these are nice and healthy places to start. I'm going to pause the lesson right here, and we will do review activities and make sure that this learning is in place. Look at some exam style questions and see if what has been explained has been uptaken successfully or not. For those of you who are online, what would usually happen after this bit? The students will watch the lesson, ask questions, make notes, send me back the notes that they've taken so I can cross-reference and make sure that there are no mistakes, there are no misconceptions in there. Then they have a period where they can ask for clarifications and check things. And when all that is done, I will send them on a variety of applications. If I'm looking for instantaneous feedback, I might give them something on quizzes to do. Some of you might be familiar with Kahoot, but I prefer quizzes to Kahoot any day. Or for the older ones, if I'm looking for exam style questions and access, we would be looking at exam style questions using apps like ClassKick, so that I can see the kids' answers and I can mark and the kids can get feedback from me. It is so easy to teach online at the moment. And if it was really necessary for a student to see my face, then it's a very simple case of lifting this and showing them my rickety face. It's very interesting why kids always want to see me talking. But yeah, there we are. That's me. This was my gift into the community. I hope that if you have kids who are doing exams in biology, especially those looking to do GCSEs in the summer, you have invited them to watch, or you have shared the video for them to watch retrospectively. Thank you so much for watching. I am so grateful that you come to watch these. I would be even more grateful if you could share it and tag it to the candidates themselves for me, so those receive the information I want them to get. My name remains Ama. I am still your teacher, your coach, your educator, and I do these lessons. I teach kids routinely, long distance, but people keep asking what it looks like. Occasionally, I feel like being generous and put the lesson online. So today was Ama feeling generous, Ama gifting a lesson to students who might find it useful. Don't hang on to it if that's not you. Please share it with people who might find it useful and tell them to follow the page so that whenever I feel generous, they can see what I put out. Thank you so much for watching.